The air in the Combined Operations Command Center was a stale cocktail of recycled oxygen, burnt coffee, and low-grade anxiety. It clung to the Nomex uniforms and the humming server racks, a permanent miasma in the windowless, subterranean cavern of concrete and steel. This was General Marcus Thorne's sanctuary, his cathedral of conflict, and he presided over it with the unyielding gravity of a man who measured his life in campaigns won and bodies counted. Every screen, every operator, every cable snaking across the raised floor was an extension of his will. Into this precisely calibrated environment walked an anomaly. Her name was Anya Sharma. She wore gray slacks, a dark blue polo shirt, and sensible, soft-soled shoes that made no sound on the polished concrete. She carried a slim leather satchel containing a laptop and nothing else. She had no uniform, no rank insignia, no military bearing whatsoever. Her presence was a quiet disruption, a stone dropped into the placid surface of a deep, dark lake. General Thorne noticed her the moment she cleared the security checkpoint, a civilian ghost materializing at the edge of his periphery. His aide, Lieutenant Colonel Evans, leaned in and murmured, "Ma'am, that's Sharma, from ONA, the Office of Net Assessment. A think tank as far as Thorne was concerned. A place where academics played with hypotheticals while real soldiers bled." Thorne's jaw tightened. He was a monument of a man, carved from granite and impatience. His face a roadmap of desert deployments and command-level stress. His silver-gray hair was cropped to a severe, disciplined length, and his eyes, the color of a winter sky, missed nothing. He watched as Sharma was shown to a small, auxiliary workstation in the far corner of the command floor, tucked away behind the meteorological analysts and next to the backup power conduits. It was a deliberate snub, an afterthought. She didn't react. She simply set down her satchel, opened her laptop, and began typing. Her focus was immediate and absolute, her small corner of the room becoming an island of intense quiet in the sea of controlled chaos. The operators at the main consoles, young men and women honed to a razor's edge, took their cue from the general. They glanced over, their expressions ranging from mild curiosity to outright disdain. A civilian, a woman, a data cruncher sent from Washington to get in the way. Whispers, soft as the rustle of digital camouflage, passed between them. "Ona? What are they assessing now, the quality of the coffee?" One drone pilot muttered to his sensor operator. "Probably here to write a report on our synergistic workflow paradigms." The operator snorted back, his eyes never leaving the thermal imaging feed from a Reaper drone circling miles above the arid landscape. Thorne let the quiet mockery flow. It was a necessary part of the ecosystem. His people needed to know who was in charge, who mattered, and who was merely scenery. He had spent 40 years earning his stars, his authority built on a foundation of grit, instinct, and an intimate understanding of his enemy's tactics. He didn't trust algorithms, and he certainly didn't trust civilian analysts who had never smelled cordite or felt the percussive thump of incoming mortar fire. He strode across the command floor, his boots making a sound like hammers striking anvils. He stopped behind Lieutenant Colonel Evans, his gaze fixed on the main holographic map table dominating the center of the room. It displayed a topographical rendering of the Al-Qadir mountain range, a notorious hornet's nest of insurgent activity. Red icons pulsed over suspected enemy positions. Blue icons marked the advance of an elite special forces team, callsign Viper. "Status on Viper?" Thorne's voice was a low growl that cut through the background hum. "Advancing on target Alpha, sir," Evans reported, his posture ramrod straight. "They're 20 minutes out. All comms green. No sign of enemy activity. The drone feeds are clean." "Clean is what worries me," Thorne grunted. He glanced over his shoulder toward the corner where Sharma sat. She was still typing, her screen angled away from view. She seemed completely oblivious to the life and death ballet unfolding around her. An academic in a war zone. It was an obscenity. He had already made a call to the Pentagon, a blistering complaint to a 3-star he'd known since West Point. "Get her out of my AO," he had demanded. "I don't need a political appointee second-guessing my operators." The response had been frustratingly bureaucratic. She's on assignment from the highest levels, Marcus. She stays. Thorne turned his back on her, focusing his simmering anger on the mission. He would tolerate her presence, but he would not acknowledge it. She was a phantom, a piece of furniture, a non-entity in his world of hard facts and lethal consequences. He would run his operation, extract the high-value target, and prove once again that wars were won by soldiers, not by statisticians in polo shirts. He walked back to his command chair on the raised dais, settling into it like a king ascending his throne. From here he could see everything. Every screen, every face, every flickering light. Except for the quiet woman in the corner, whom he had already willed himself to forget. She was just data noise, and he was an expert at filtering it out. The primary briefing for Operation Nightfall Fury began at 0400 hours, when the command center was at its peak operational tempo. General Thorne stood before the holographic map, a conductor orchestrating his symphony of war. His senior staff formed a tight semicircle around him. Intelligence officers, air support coordinators, logistics chiefs, and his second-in-command, Evans. Anya Sharma stood at the back of the group, just inside the circle but clearly not a part of it. She held a small datapad, her expression unreadable. Thorne's briefing was a masterclass in military precision. He outlined the final approach vectors for Viper Team, the exfiltration routes, the rules of engagement, and the contingency plans. His voice was confident, his language stripped of all ambiguity. He pointed to a fortified compound nestled deep within a canyon. Target Alpha is here. Our intel, confirmed by Humant and Sigint, places the HVT codenamed Scythe inside this structure. We have a 30-minute window after Viper makes entry before his QRF can be mobilized from their barracks here, he said, tapping a location 5 miles to the east. Air support will suppress any response from this vector. Questions? The room was silent. The plan was sound, built on weeks of surveillance and reliable intelligence. It was a classic Thorne operation. Overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Then, a quiet voice from the back of the group spoke. General. Thorne's head snapped up. His eyes found Sharma. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. No one interrupted the general during a final briefing. The pattern of insurgent communications over the last 72 hours doesn't support the QRF being stationed there, she said, her voice even and calm. She didn't sound challenging, merely observational. There's a high volume of encrypted, low-power burst transmissions originating from these coordinates. She gestured with her datapad toward a seemingly empty stretch of desert plateau to the west of the target. It's inconsistent with a dormant barracks. It's more indicative of a command and control node on high alert. A wave of disbelief rippled through the officers. Evans shot her a look that could have melted steel. Thorne's expression turned to ice. He took a slow, deliberate step toward her. Ms. Sharma, he began, his voice dangerously low. We deal in facts from the front, confirmed by assets in the field. Not statistical models from a university. Our intelligence on the QRF location is A1 triple-sourced. What you're looking at is probably background chatter. Goat herders with satellite phones. A few of the junior officers smirked. The tension broke slightly, replaced by a shared sense of condescension. Sharma didn't flinch. With respect, General, the encryption is military grade, and the transmission timings correspond with the movement of your drone assets. They're talking when they think you're not listening. They're watching you watch them. The Eastern Barracks could be a decoy. Thorne had had enough. He saw this as a direct challenge to his authority in front of his entire command staff. It was an intolerable breach of protocol. Your observation is noted, he said, the words clipped and dismissive. He turned his back on her, a clear signal that the conversation was over. And it is irrelevant. We proceed as planned. Disperse. The officers broke away, moving back to their stations, a low buzz of conversation following them. They were all talking about her. The audacity, the sheer arrogance of a civilian analyst questioning a Thorne battle plan. Later, as the operation commenced, Thorne summoned her to his small, glass-walled office overlooking the command floor. He didn't offer her a seat. He stood with his arms crossed, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Let me be perfectly clear, Ms. Sharma," he said, his voice a low rumble of controlled fury. "You are a guest here, a temporary and unwelcome one. You have no authority. You will not speak during my briefings unless spoken to. You will not distract my staff with academic theories. And you will not, ever again, question my intelligence in front of my people." Anya simply met his gaze. Her dark eyes were steady, revealing nothing. "I was tasked with providing a full-spectrum analysis, General. That includes identifying data anomalies that might pose a risk to the mission or your personnel. My duty is to the data. Your duty," Thorne seethed, stepping closer, "is to stay out of my way. I have men putting their lives on the line based on plans I have personally vetted. I will not have their focus compromised by some statistical ghost hunt. I've made calls to have you removed. Until my request is granted, you will confine yourself to your workstation and you will keep your anomalous opinions to yourself. Is that understood?" "Understood, General," she replied, her voice still unervingly calm. Her composure infuriated him more than any argument could have. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't apologetic. She was simply present. A quiet, immovable object. He felt an urge to physically throw her out of his command center, to erase the civilian stain from his military sanctuary. "Get out," he snarled, turning his back on her to stare out at the controlled, humming efficiency of his command floor. She left without another word, her soft-soled shoes making no sound. Thorne watched her walk back to her corner, a solitary figure in a world she didn't belong in. He felt a surge of grim satisfaction. He had put her in her place. The chain of command was absolute. The mission would proceed and it would succeed. And when it did, it would be the final, irrefutable proof that his way, the soldier's way, was the only way that mattered. He would be vindicated. Her nonsensical theories about goat herders and ghost signals would be forgotten, a minor irritant in a successful operation. He turned his full attention back to the holographic map, where Viper's blue icons were now less than a mile from Target Alpha. Everything was going exactly as planned. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't a shout or an explosion, but a sudden, chilling silence. "Viper 1, this is Archangel. Report status." Over the comms officer's voice was calm, routine. He waited. The standard response time was 3 seconds. 5 seconds passed. 10. "Viper 1, do you copy? How's your status?" "Over." Only static answered. A thick, hissing void where a human voice should have been. On the main screen, the live feed from the Reaper drone overhead flickered. The high-definition thermal image of the canyon dissolved into a blizzard of digital snow. Red letters flashed in the corner of the screen. "Signal lost." "What the hell is going on?" Thorne's voice boomed across the floor. "Get that feed back up. Now." "We can't, sir," a young airman shouted back, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "Something's jamming us. It's not just the Reaper, it's everything. SATCOM is down. All drone feeds are compromised. We're blind." Chaos erupted. The controlled hum of the command center escalated into a cacophony of frantic voices and blaring alarms. Operators shouted jargon-laced reports that all painted the same terrifying picture. They had lost complete contact with Viper Team. One moment, the team was advancing smoothly toward the target. The next, they had vanished from every sensor, their communications severed as if by a knife. "Sir, we're getting ghost data," the lead sensor analyst yelled, pointing at the holographic map. Dozens of new red icons, representing enemy forces, were blinking into existence around the eastern barracks. The very place Thorne had identified as the QRF location. "Massive enemy movement detected. Scramble the gunships," Thorne ordered, his mind racing. "Air support, I want you to level that barracks compound. Light it up." "General, we can't," the air support coordinator shot back, his face pale. "We have no positive ID on Viper's location. If they were forced to fall back toward that sector, we could be firing on our own men." The trap was sprung. Thorne felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. The enemy hadn't just ambushed his team. They had blinded him, deafened him, and were now feeding him poisoned information, turning his own technological superiority into a weapon against him. The ghost data on the map was a taunt, a deliberate misdirection designed to sow panic and force a fatal mistake. He was a master chess player who suddenly couldn't see the board or touch the pieces. His instincts screamed at him, but he had no information to act upon. His fists clenched and unclenched at his sides. For the first time in decades, General Marcus Thorne was helpless. He stared at the static-filled screens, the blinking red icons he knew were lies, the frantic faces of his operators. They looked to him for answers, for the decisive command that would cut through the chaos. But he had none. He had walked his men into a sophisticated electronic warfare trap he hadn't even known existed. The silence from Viper Team was a physical weight, pressing down on the entire room. Every person there knew what it meant. A team of 12 elite operators, alone and unaided in hostile territory, fighting for their lives against an enemy who controlled the digital battlefield. Lieutenant Colonel Evans was trying to raise the team on an alternate frequency. His voice strained. Any Viper element, this is Archangel on tertiary band. If you can hear this, pop IR smoke. I repeat, pop IR smoke. Nothing. The enemy's jamming was absolute. They had created a total information blackout around the ambush site. Sir, we have to do something, Evans said, turning to Thorne, his professional composure cracking under the immense pressure. We can't just sit here. Do what, Colonel? Thorne snapped, his frustration boiling over. Send a rescue team in blind? Throw more men into the grinder? We have no actionable intelligence. None. He paced the dais, his mind a maelstrom of recriminations. He had been arrogant. He had dismissed the warning. The quiet voice of the analyst echoed in his head. It's inconsistent with a dormant barracks. They're watching you watch them. He had called it background chatter. Goat herders. He had publicly humiliated the one person who had seen the truth. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had failed. His pride had blinded him, and now Viper Team was paying the price. The weight of command had never felt so heavy, so suffocating. The cathedral of conflict had become his tomb. While the command center descended into a maelstrom of organized panic, Anya Sharma's corner remained an oasis of profound calm. She wasn't looking at the main screens, with their screaming static and flashing false data. Her attention was focused entirely on her own laptop, her fingers moving with a fluid, economical grace across the keyboard. She had closed the standard military intelligence dashboards. Instead, her screen was filled with cascading lines of raw code and complex data visualizations that would have been unintelligible to anyone else in the room. She was a digital archaeologist, digging through layers of discarded information, searching for the faint signals buried beneath the enemy's electronic onslaught. She ignored the corrupted satellite feeds and the jammed drone telemetry. That was the noise, the magician's grand misdirection. She was looking for the subtle tells, the unintentional digital footprints the enemy was leaving behind. Her first query pulled raw data from the regional civilian power grid. She bypassed the polished utility company reports and went straight for the raw substation output logs, cross-referencing them with millisecond timestamps. The command floor was focused on a canyon miles away, but Anya was watching the flow of electricity. Her program flagged a minute, anomalous power drain originating from a sector of the Western Plateau, the same area she had warned Thorne about. It was a tiny fluctuation, less than 1%, easily mistaken for a standard grid variance. But it wasn't steady. It pulsed in a precise, repeating cycle, the signature of military-grade capacitors charging and discharging, the power source for a massive electronic warfare suite. Next, she accessed the archives of a dormant geological survey project. The U.S. government had installed hundreds of microseismic sensors across the mountain range years ago to monitor tectonic activity. The project was defunct, the network officially offline. But the sensors were still there, still passively recording vibrations in the earth. Anya wrote a quick algorithm to filter out the background noise of wind, distant traffic, and natural earth tremors. She was hunting for a specific frequency, a low-level, high-frequency hum. The harmonic resonance produced by the enemy's jamming array. A few seconds later, a single sensor pinged. It was located less than 100 meters from the power grid anomaly. She wasn't just finding them. She was building a complete schematic of their operation from data no one else even knew existed. Her third search was the most unorthodox. She tapped into the metadata of the region's largest civilian cellular network. She couldn't read the encrypted messages, but she didn't need to. She was tracking the packets themselves, their size, their frequency, and their point of origin. The enemy's false data broadcasts, the ones creating the ghost army on Thorne's holographic map, had to originate from somewhere. She traced the packet routing and found the source. A single mobile transmitter moving along a highway near the eastern barracks, broadcasting a powerful, looping signal. A decoy. A simple, elegant, and brutally effective deception. She now had 3 points of convergence: a power signature, a seismic echo, and the true location of the decoy broadcaster. The picture was complete and terrifyingly clear. Viper team had walked into an ambush not in the canyon, but on the western plateau. They were being pinned down by an enemy operating from a hidden, fortified position, likely underground, while Thorne's attention was deliberately drawn miles away. Anya stood up. Her movement was so quiet and deliberate that it seemed to cut through the noise of the room. She walked from her corner toward the raised command dais, her soft-soled shoes making no sound. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She moved with an unnerving purpose that drew the eyes of the frantic operators she passed. She stopped at the edge of the holographic map table, where General Thorne was staring blankly at the false intelligence, his face a mask of grim defeat. "General." Her voice was not loud, but it had the quality of a perfectly struck tuning fork. It sliced through the surrounding chaos, and for a moment, the frantic shouting subsided. Thorne looked up, his eyes bloodshot with stress. He saw her standing there, calm and composed, and a flash of pure rage went through him. "What is it, Sharma? Have you come to tell me I told you so?" He snarled. Anya ignored the barb. She raised her hand and pointed to the holographic map, to the spot where everyone thought Viper was being attacked. "They're not here," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. Then, she moved her finger across the map, over miles of empty, mountainous terrain, to the western plateau she had indicated hours earlier. The spot was marked by nothing. No roads, no compounds, no intelligence icons. It was blank. "They're here," she said, her finger tapping a precise set of coordinates. "In the old Soviet iron mine tunnels. The main entrance is here, concealed by a rockslide. The jamming array is drawing power from the civilian substation at grid reference 4-79er. Its harmonic resonance is detectable on the old USGS seismic sensor 7. Your ghost army is a looped broadcast from a mobile unit on the M4 highway. Viper team isn't in the canyon. They've been ambushed on the plateau, and the enemy is herding them toward the mine entrance." She paused, letting the information settle. "You have approximately 8 minutes until they are driven underground, at which point you will lose any chance of air support and they will be slaughtered." The command center fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Every operator, every officer, turned from their screens to stare at her. They had been fighting ghosts, chasing shadows, completely outmaneuvered. And this quiet woman, with her laptop and her strange data, had just illuminated the entire board. General Thorne stared at her, his mind reeling. What she was saying was impossible. It was derived from sources he didn't use, methods he didn't understand. It contradicted every piece of intelligence from his trusted, multi-million-dollar military assets. His training, his experience, his entire 40-year career screamed at him to dismiss it as insanity. This was his command, his decision, to trust his gut, his men, his entire system, or to trust her. "On what authority?" he finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse. "Based on what intelligence?" "Based on the data, General," Anya said simply. "The enemy is screaming their location, but you haven't been listening to the right frequency." Thorne stood frozen, caught in a moment of terrible indecision. His world had been turned upside down. The certainty he had built his life upon had crumbled into dust, and in its place stood this calm, inscrutable woman and her impossible claims. He was about to order her arrested, to have her physically removed for sowing confusion during a crisis. His mouth opened to give the command. At that exact moment, a high-pitched, insistent ringing cut through the tense silence. It was a sound few in the room had ever heard outside of a drill. It was the secure line, the direct link to the National Command Authority. A young communications tech, his eyes wide with shock, answered it. "COC, this is Tech Sergeant Riley." He listened for a moment, his face going white. He held the receiver out to Thorne, his hand trembling slightly. "General, it's for you. It's the White House." Thorne felt a jolt of ice in his veins. He took the receiver, his mind racing through a dozen catastrophic scenarios. A declaration of war? A national emergency? He pressed the receiver to his ear. "This is General Thorne." The voice on the other end was unmistakable, calm and steady, with the weight of the world behind it. It was the President of the United States. "Marcus," the President said, dispensing with formality. "I'm told you have a situation with Viper Team. I'm also told you have Anya Sharma on site." Thorne's throat went dry. "Yes, Mr. President." "Good," the President continued. "Then listen to me very carefully. You are to give Ms. Sharma anything she requires. You will follow her recommendations without question and without delay. Her analysis is not to be debated. It is to be acted upon. Her call sign is Oracle. She sees things we don't. She has my full authority, and by extension, she has yours. Is that understood, General?" Thorne felt the floor drop out from under him. Oracle. The name was a whisper, a legend in the deepest, most classified corners of the intelligence community. Not a person, but a concept. A ghost analyst credited with preventing 3 separate coups, locating 2 stolen nuclear warheads, and predicting the collapse of an Eastern European government 6 months before it happened. A name spoken with a mixture of fear and reverence. He had always assumed Oracle was a committee or a sophisticated AI, not this quiet woman in a polo shirt. "General?" The President's voice prodded. "Do you understand your orders?" Thorne's mind snapped back to the present. He looked from the phone in his hand to Anya Sharma, who was watching him with the same unnerving calm. He was looking at a living myth. The political appointee he had tried to throw out, the academic he had mocked, was one of the nation's most vital and secret strategic assets. "Yes, Mr. President," Thorne said, his voice barely a whisper. "Understood." He hung up the phone, the click echoing in the cavernous silence of the room. The entire command staff was staring at him, waiting. He took a deep breath, the air tasting of ozone and humility. He turned to face Anya, no longer seeing a civilian nuisance, but a figure of immense, terrifying competence. The balance of power in the room had just been fundamentally and irrevocably altered. The shift was palpable, a physical change in the atmospheric pressure. Thorne, a man who had commanded armies, felt like a lieutenant taking his first orders. He cleared his throat. The sound was unnaturally loud. He looked directly at Anya, his gaze stripped of all its former arrogance, replaced with a raw, desperate need. "Ms. Sharma," he began, then corrected himself, the legendary call sign feeling alien on his tongue. "Oracle. What's your recommendation?" The use of the call sign sent a shockwave through the room. Whispers spread like wildfire. Oracle. The legend was real, and she was standing right there. Lieutenant Colonel Evans stared at her, his mouth slightly agape, replaying his own dismissive attitude in his mind with a dawning sense of horror. Anya didn't acknowledge the title. She simply stepped forward to the holographic map. Her authority was no longer in question. It was absolute. The room reoriented itself around her as if she were a new center of gravity. "First, shut down the decoy feed," she said, her voice crisp and commanding. "Clear the board of all ghost data. I want a clean slate." "Do it," Thorne barked, and the operators scrambled to comply. The false red icons vanished, leaving the map stark and empty. Next, Anya continued, redirect the rivet joint aircraft from its holding pattern over the eastern sector to these coordinates. She pointed to a spot high above the western plateau. Tell them to ignore all conventional SIGINT. They are to focus on a single narrowband frequency. I'm uploading the specifications now. It's the handshake protocol for the enemy's internal comms. It will give us a direct line into their network. But ma'am, the SIGINT officer stammered, that's a civilian satellite uplink frequency. It shouldn't have military traffic. It does today, Anya said without looking at him. Do it. Thorn nodded sharply at the officer, who immediately began relaying the orders, his skepticism replaced by hurried obedience. Anya then turned to the air support coordinator. Your gunships. They have 3 minutes to get on station. The enemy's jamming array has a critical flaw. Its cooling system is liquid nitrogen-based and has to vent and reboot every 19 minutes to prevent overheating. The next cycle begins in 7 minutes and will last for exactly 174 seconds. During that window, you will have clear communications and targeting. That is your only chance to provide air support. The coordinator stared at her, dumbfounded. How could you possibly know that? I cross-referenced the manufacturer's specifications for the array's power capacitors with the thermal bleed-off detected by a passing weather satellite, she answered matter-of-factly. Your window is non-negotiable. Be ready. She moved on, a whirlwind of precise, data-driven commands. She redirected a surveillance satellite, instructing its operator to use a specific multispectral imaging filter that could detect the faint heat signature of human bodies through 6 feet of Earth, pinpointing Viper's exact location as they were being forced into the mine. She had the comms team broadcast a single, encrypted data burst on a frequency used by local shepherds, embedding a message for Viper team. It contained only a set of coordinates and a timestamp, the location of a weak point in the mine's ventilation system, and the exact moment the gunships would strike. The command center, which had been a pit of chaotic despair minutes earlier, was now a model of focused efficiency, all directed by her calm voice. Thorn stood back and watched, a spectator in his own domain. She wasn't just issuing orders. She was predicting the future. She saw the battlefield in a way he couldn't comprehend, not as a physical space of hills and canyons, but as an interconnected web of data, a living, breathing network of signals and signatures. As the gunship's attack window approached, a new feed appeared on the main screen. It was from the rivet joint. They had isolated the frequency. Garbled voices in a foreign dialect filled the room, the enemy's unencrypted command channel. They were laughing, boasting about the trapped American soldiers. Viper team is in the box, a voice crackled. The wolves are in the pen. Send in the second team to finish them. A collective gasp went through the room. It was confirmation of everything. Gunships are on station, the air support coordinator announced, his voice tense. 30 seconds to the cooling cycle. Anya's eyes were fixed on a small countdown timer she had displayed on the main screen. The entire room held its breath. 15 seconds. Thorn could hear his own heart pounding in his ears. 5, 4, 2, 1. Now. Comms are clear. We have them. The comms officer shouted. Viper lead is responding. They got the message. Visual on target. The gunship pilot's voice crackled over the speakers, suddenly crystal clear. I have multiple hostiles massing at the mine entrance. Weapons free. Danger close. The main screen switched to the gunship's targeting feed. The world became a landscape of stark white and black. White-hot figures, the enemy soldiers, were swarming the entrance to the mine. A moment later, the image was obliterated by the brighter, more intense heat signature of a 30mm cannon salvo, turning the ground to a churning, incandescent hell. The sound, a deep, guttural roar, filled the command center seconds later. The strike was devastatingly precise. The enemy forces at the entrance were annihilated. Viper is on the move, the comms officer reported. They're breaking out through the ventilation shaft. They see the extraction birds. For the next 10 minutes, Anya calmly directed the final phase of the operation, guiding the rescue helicopters along a flight path that avoided the remaining pockets of enemy anti-aircraft fire, predicting their locations based on the panic chatter from their compromised network. The tension in the room slowly bled away, replaced by a rising tide of elation and sheer, unadulterated awe. They watched as the last member of Viper Team was pulled onto a Black Hawk, the helicopter lifting away into the pre-dawn sky. All birds are away. All personnel accounted for. The comms officer finally announced, his voice thick with emotion. A quiet, staggered cheer went through the room. People were clapping each other on the back, slumping into their chairs with relief. But most of them were looking at Anya Sharma, their faces filled with a reverence usually reserved for deities. She had pulled a dozen men back from the grave through sheer intellect. Lieutenant Colonel Evans just stood there, shaking his head slowly in disbelief. He looked at Thorne, and the two men shared a look of profound, humbling revelation. They had just witnessed a miracle. Hours later, the sun was a faint line of liquid gold on the eastern horizon. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the quiet hum of routine operations. The crisis was over. Reports were being filed, after-action reviews initiated. The command center ran on a skeleton crew, the night shift waiting to be relieved. Anya Sharma was back in her corner, at her small, forgotten workstation. The chaos and the adulation might as well have happened on another planet. She was wiping the screen of her laptop with a microfiber cloth, her movements as precise and methodical as her analysis. Her satchel was packed. Her work here was done. She was preparing to become a ghost again. General Thorne approached her, moving with a quietness that was uncharacteristic for him. In his hands he held two heavy ceramic mugs, steam rising from them in the cool, recycled air. He walked past the main holographic table, now displaying peaceful weather patterns, and stopped in front of her desk. He set one of the mugs down on the corner of her workstation, next to her keyboard. It was black coffee, no sugar, no cream. He had noticed what she drank when she first arrived. He didn't say, "Thank you." The words were too small, too inadequate for the debt that was owed. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." An apology couldn't begin to cover the depth of his arrogance, the catastrophic scale of his misjudgment. Any words he could summon would only diminish the magnitude of what had happened. So he said nothing of the sort. He stood there for a moment, holding his own mug, and looked toward the armored slit of a window that offered the only view of the outside world. The sky was turning from inky black to a soft, bruised purple. "Sunrise in an hour," he said, his voice a low, gravelly murmur. "They say the desert is beautiful then." It wasn't an order or a statement. It was an offering, a simple, shared observation, a recognition of a world beyond the concrete walls of his command center. Anya picked up the mug. She wrapped her hands around its warmth and took a small sip. She looked toward the window, her gaze distant, as if she were seeing patterns in the dawn that no one else could. "It is," she said. Her voice was quiet, holding no trace of triumph or recrimination. It was just a statement of fact. Thorne nodded slowly. That was all that needed to be said. A silent, profound acknowledgement passed between the old soldier and the quiet analyst. A truce, an understanding, respect. He turned and walked back toward his command dais, leaving her with her coffee. He didn't look back. He settled into his chair, the seat of his power, but the room felt different now. It was no longer solely his. Anya Sharma took another sip of the hot, black coffee. She watched the light grow on the horizon, the long, sharp shadows of the new day stretching across the vast, silent desert. Then she turned back to her laptop, opened a new encrypted file, and began to analyze the faint, anomalous signals already gathering on the edge of the next crisis. The sun was rising, but for the Oracle the watch never ended.